All right, doing a volume check on YouTube.
You have the YouTube up, Brad?
Yeah, it came up in the lobby. I'm just checking to
Okay.
see if, yeah. Good? Awesome. Okay, thank you. All right, we're at about 5:57, everybody. If you want to start kind of getting to your spots. And we have gone ahead and started streaming just a few minutes early to make sure that we're up and running in the lobby. So we are already streaming on YouTube. Rick, can go ahead and, if you haven't, start the recording too.
Yeah, it started.
Okay, I've got 6 o'clock. If I could have all the planning commissioners' monitors video back on, please, and we will get started. Still. We are still waiting on Lucy, but I'm sure she will join us at any second. We do have enough in on a quorum. So, Madam Chair, we are streaming, recording. You are free to start.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the February 3rd, 2022 meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. In response to the coronavirus epidemic, this meeting is being held via WebEx online meeting platform, which is being broadcast on YouTube. Members of the public were provided the opportunity to email comments to the Planning Department prior to 12 noon yesterday. Members of the public may also address the Planning Commission in real time via electronic communication provided in the auditorium at 120 West Dougherty Street, subject to safe distancing measures. For those of you viewing the meeting remotely, you will find the meeting agenda with a YouTube meeting address on the Planning Department website at accgov.com/planning. For those of you viewing the meeting from the auditorium, on the table by the auditorium door, you will find a sign-in sheet and copies of tonight's agenda. After staff presentation of an agenda item, we will receive public comment, first from the applicant, then from those in the auditorium. 10 minutes are allowed to address the commission for the applicant or their representative. 3 minutes are allowed for anyone else who wishes to address the commission. After public comment, the applicant or their representative may request a 2-minute response. Once the public hearing is closed, the Planning Commission will proceed to discuss the item. We will receive no additional public comments unless requested by the commission. When addressing the commission from the auditorium, please speak from the designated place as directed by staff. For all speakers, please provide your name, address, and nature of your interest in the project. For those in the auditorium, a timer device will display an amber light 30 seconds before the expiration of the allotted time and a red light upon expiration of the allotted time. So please pay attention to the light so we won't have to interrupt you. For those addressing the commission remotely, you will also be expected to adhere to specified time limits. Exhibits may be displayed by the applicants remotely or in the auditorium. Written correspondence received by noon yesterday has been forwarded to the commission and is part of the public record. Any additional written materials to be placed into the record must be read during public comment within the time limits previously stated. Please direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to the applicants. And for those of you in the auditorium, please refrain from applauding or jeering any of the speakers. For everyone participating in this evening's meeting, please turn off or silence your cell phones. For commission members, please mute your microphone if you're not speaking. Use the chat box if you have any technical issues. Raise your hand to your camera if you'd like to speak, and please wait to be recognized. And remember that the meeting is being recorded. Okay, we'll just start on our first item of general business, introduction of staff reports and all other documents submitted to the Planning Commission at this meeting into the official record. Could I get a motion from one of the commission members to do so? Joey, and seconded by Alice. All in favor? Please say, or raise your hand or say aye. And opposed? Okay, great. And the second item is the January 6, 2022 Planning Commission meeting minutes. I just need a motion to approve. Jim to approve, and Joey second. All in favor? And opposed? Okay, great. And Brad, do we have anything with May Courts today?
No report. I did just get an email from Lucy that she's having a hard time getting back in. I'm gonna send her another invite real quick while we do the staff report.
Okay. Okay, so we'll start with our first item of new business tonight, and that is 3700, 3706, 08, and 10 Atlanta Highway. Before the, well, Brad, did you recommend that I make these now or after the staff report?
I think it's appropriate to do it now before we start the staff report.
Okay, sounds good. So before we get started with the discussion around this agenda item, I wanted to communicate a few points to those who are watching or participating in this meeting. First, to the members of the public who took the time to send us your written comments, thank you. We really appreciate receiving that input, and we do indeed get it. I also want to take a couple minutes to clarify what the process is for an agenda item like this, and what we're going to be doing at tonight's meeting. So for this particular agenda item, this is the first of 2 Planning Commission meetings for this item. At this one, we will listen to the staff report, applicant presentation, public comments related to this preliminary plan development proposal. Then we will discuss the item and provide our own feedback. We will not vote on this item tonight. Tonight is what we call comments only. We'll see it again at a future meeting where we will vote on whether to recommend approval or denial to the mayor and commission. After that, the mayor and commission would see this application. At all of these meetings, including tonight, public comment is allowed and encouraged. Since this is a preliminary application, we recommend that the public focus their comments on the improvements that they would like to see to this application. Again, this is the first of at least 3 opportunities the public will have to speak about this proposed development. You're more than welcome to speak at any or all of them. Okay, if I could, we'll start then with the staff report.
Okay, the addresses of this proposal is 3700, 3706, 3708, and 3710 Atlanta Highway. This is a planned development. And there's two requests tonight. So again, we're not voting tonight, but there are two proposals to consider. The mall property has two future land use designations, employment center and general business. The employment center just being on part of the property. We'll have a map of that in a second. But the proposal is to take it all to general business. And then the zoning would actually not change. The base zoning would stay CG, commercial general, just adding the planned development designation. So this is the map, the boundary map of the parcels involved. There are 6 parcels altogether. 2 of them just don't have addresses. They include the two out parcels here. Do not involve the Pep Boys or the Zaxby's or the Burger King. There are 2 other out parcels involved, as well as the Sears parcel, I think it's the Macy's parcel, as well as the General Mall tract, and then the former theater property in the back. And just an aerial view of the existing conditions. We have Atlanta Highway frontage road here, and this is Huntington to the east. There's Maryland Farmer that connects to the northwest property out to Cleveland Road, and of course the loop drive around the entire property. So the request is, again, a redevelopment of the Georgia Square Mall, and you may hear mention of a TAD. This is a tax allocation district. That is in its beginning stages. So at this time, there's no formal project agreement. And the applicant is interested in working with the TAD process, but at this time, it's just preliminary, in preliminary stages. So there's 6 parcels of 74 acres. The former theater parcel, again, that's the one that's going to require a future land use change. And I'll have that map in a second. And then significant reduction of commercial use by almost 50%. So a lot of the mall, the Sears, the Macy's, the part in between the Pennies and the central part is coming down. So about 50% reduction there. Significant introduction of multifamily use with 1,138 dwelling units. A lot of those are 1-bedroom units. So I think the bedrooms altogether were about 1,700. Mall access road improvements, independent senior housing is proposed in the back along on the theater property, and a retail center up front with a grocery store. 8 phases are proposed, so this is a long, extended project altogether. And then they have asked for 7 requested waivers to code standards, and we'll have a list of those. So the waivers here, we have minimum parking reduction from the requirement by 407 spaces. So the ordinance does allow shared parking, and we do have a mix of uses here, residential and commercial. We have asked for more information, just where those shared parking facilities would be, but we certainly support the shared facilities. Minimum tree canopy, they are actually increasing the current tree canopy from 10 to 15% because we do ask for parking lot trees and other trees, but it's much less than the required 40% that would be required typically of such development. Also, there's minimum landscaped area. There may be some confusion between pervious and landscaped. It is a little bit of a difference there. They need to have a 20% landscaped area. The minimum parking lot trees, we ask for 1 per 7. Some of that can be outside on the perimeter of the parking lot. There's only needs to be 1 every 14 spaces, but then 1 every 7 spaces in general. Parking buffers, and that's for the 2 out parcels fronting Atlanta Highway. In one area, there's a retaining wall which suddenly drops off in the right of way. We certainly understand that area. You can't plant anything but in the right of way. But there is some area we feel like for some extra landscaping along the rest of it. Roadway construction standards, if they are interested in dedicating some of the roadway there to public maintenance, there's a question there of bringing it up to public standards. And they've asked to waive some of those standards. And then we have minimum bicycle parking, 170 is required. They've asked for 84. Okay, so this is the future land use map I was mentioning, and you can see the theater property back here is the only one that's employment right now. And so that's the only one that's changing to general business. Everything else would remain with that future land use designation. And then the zoning, we're just adding the PD designation. So this is a good color rendering, helps clarify things. So we wanted to use this one first, but you can see the pink or peach color here. Those are multifamily. Back here in the theater would be senior living, independent living, adult, I think it calls active adult community. The commercial in the light blue, again, the old pennies, which I did want to mention, we had taken the application as just having restaurant and retail businesses. Talking to the applicant, they do plan on using the wide variety of CG possibilities. In the Pennies building, for example, might end up as a corporate office. Taking down in between the Pennies and the central part of the mall, taking down the Macy's and the Sears. But that's the commercial. This would be new commercial up here with the grocery store and some other retail stores or restaurants. Again, it could be services, offices, or other items as well. And the applicant has mentioned with all the residential, they would like to have a daycare center somewhere. Out front would remain these two commercial out parcels. Don't have a lot of detail on how they'd be remodeled at this time, but there are plans to remodel those as well. So we do have the blow up. If we need to see blow up versions, more detailed versions of these plans, we do have the ones, and you guys have the hard copies of these, but if you need to see something, we do have them digitally as well. So our comments right now, we do need more information on various things. And talking to the applicant, and of course, I hope he'll confirm that. We understand this will end up being one parcel. Our staff report had mentioned needing parcel by parcel information, but we have been told this may end up being one parcel, but we still need a residential density figure. Right now, it appears to be, if you take all the total acreage, just under the RM2 allowance of 24 bedrooms an acre. We need a floor area ratio, phase plans, and we have talked to the applicant about that. Because there's so many phases, we would like to see what does it look like with phase one, what does it look like with phase two, and so forth. Transit facilities are needed, to show where those would be, because right now this is an important link on the transit. It's the end of the routes farthest west, and we would like to see, how the transit's going to be handled. Shared parking, again, to mention that earlier, just about where those shared parking facilities will be. Pervious parking is needed. That's because it's commercial property. A commercial development of this large size requires a certain percentage of pervious parking, and to show where those will be. Architecture, we don't have any binding architectural elevations at this time, and those would be required with the master plan submittal. So we're really specific on stories, materials, and basic design. Furnished sidewalk, we didn't see some of the sidewalk along Huntington and Atlanta Highway being shown. Now we do have a GDOT project here, and we have asked the applicant. They have the GDOT plans and have asked him to show those plans, which is a very very soon. I can say that will come in the near future as a GDOT improvement. So we'd like to see those improvements on the plans. Multi-use trail network is mentioned by Leisure Services for not only pedestrians but bicycle network, and then to show the water and sewer public easements to make sure we don't have any conflicts with trees and buildings and so forth. I mentioned the phase plans a while ago, and then right now, as far as the waivers, staff doesn't support the tree canopy landscape bicycle parking waivers, especially in the proposed high density residential areas. We would like to see those treated more like a multifamily zone rather than just a the bare commercial type type cityscape. So we would like to see more landscaping, open space in those areas. But Leisure Services mentioned a dog park would be nice. Pedestrian and bicycle amenities again, and then we have sent other minor technical corrections to the applicant. These are just some of the concerns, but we've listed all those in the staff report. And so that concludes the staff report.
Thank you. Okay, we'll hear from our applicant next.
Madam Chair, good evening. My name is Abe Abu Hamdan. Abe is fine. That last name is pretty tough. Been here 38 years and everybody calls me Abe. So good to see you all. Thank you, commissioners, for being there and allowing us to be here in front of you this evening. The mall project is a kind of sensitive touch for me. I've shopped there early 80s. And used to be bustling. It was hard to find a spot to park during the holidays. So, the staff did a great job in reviewing our application, our preliminary submittal for the PD. And we have great input also from the community as a whole. We had held a town hall meeting on the 20th of January at the mall. And we had a great turnout. I mean, it was in excess of 80 folks or so. And we had some commissioners and the mayor as well. We appreciate that. And Commissioner Houle really assisted greatly in spreading the word and let constituents know and citizens know about this town hall meeting. So I have a great sentiment about the mall and really trying to redevelop this particular area. As you know, it's a CG. It's already zoned commercial. It's already developed. We have over 83% impervious coverage on site currently. And while it might not seem, we're putting a lot of greenery there, but we added close to 8 acres total in green space, taking impervious and making it pervious. Now, we do have some room to improve on tree coverage and whatnot, and some of the landscaping. And I think there was miscalculations in terms of, or misunderstanding in terms of landscape areas, and that would be met. So, but first, let me just tell you the idea of looking at the mall declining over the years and coming down to about 46% occupancy only today. The majority of the big box retailers and other stores closed and moved on, and demographics, way of life has changed. It's just of way shopping. So we're trying to create something more about an open air kind of lifestyle setting for smaller commercial components. But the idea is to have a mixed use development here that kind of makes a complete circle. So work, live, and play. And by adding commercial, by adding office space, by adding services. And as Mr. Cowick mentioned that, we have a lot of other businesses than retail. And believe me, we want to keep everybody local. So anybody that is in the mall currently in the section to be removed, we would like for them to stay. We are talking already with them about the possibility of moving them into a newer space, updated space. So, but having a grocery store, having services, having commercial restaurants, having retail, and having the residential component really makes a nice complete circle, for this proposed mixed use. Now, it is important also to understand there's certain things we got to do to make it also an Athens project. And, that's the walkability, that's the sidewalks, the bike lanes, the trees, the open space, the plazas. So we're fully aware of that. We heard quite a bit of comments and we answered a lot of questions during the town hall meeting, and I've read through the comments as well that y'all have received. And we want to try to address that as well prior to submitting the master plan for consideration. So a lot of input have been gathered. Some of the bigger items that a lot of folks brought was related to traffic. This development actually reduces the amount of traffic that would be generated from the site. So we're helping the issue that's more of a regional. If you look at Atlanta Highway, it's a regional issue, regional concern, which that's why you see GDOT having a proposed project and planned, not proposed, a planned improvements project to help that situation, help alleviate the traffic flow. And, the main entrance, as you know, on the GDOT plan is actually it's going to become right in, right out. There will be a median in front of that entrance. So focus would be more on the signalized intersections. So it's very important to understand that we're taking an 83% covered site down to 72.5%, and maybe even further. We're not through yet. Obviously, we want to take input, comment as much as possible and reach that. The project will be phased in probably over 5 to 6 years at this stage, what we're looking at. So it's not going to be just it, as you can see. And we understand we need to give a little bit more detail on how, not just the phase lines, but how it's going to actually transition. I would call it transitional phase line. We feel that this is an excellent way of, taking a project that has been declining over the years and make it really more of an icon, a location, a place, something that's people would love to use and utilize, whether you're internally living there or in the community. So there's, plans for park, open space, public plazas. And excuse me if I'm talking a little quick because I don't have much time to cover really an amount of data here, information that we want to provide. But we truly are very excited about this project. I can't tell you from my own alone, but I think Mr. Mark Jennings is online with us here. He's one of the owners of the property. He's a local developer, local home builder. So this project will stay as a local ownership, maintenance. The units will be for rent, not for sale. There is a component that we will be pursuing. That's the TAD, Tax Allocation District, and that's for the benefit of the community as a whole. There are certain standards we have to meet to have an agreement with the county on that, but that would be forthcoming. This is not part of today's presentation. I just wanted to bring that up and let you know. So we hope this will be a great destination for the county. We know it will be. There are some of those really waivers that we have asked after discussions with the staff and also input from the community, citizens and others. We will be addressing some of those. Some of those waivers will go away. For example, the 20% landscape area, we have that already. We have in excess of that actually presented on the current plan. The bicycle lanes, we're going to provide the full required amount. We just have to talk about strategic location with your staff to make sure wherever we place them is going to work for the community as well as make sense overall. So, and we felt like it was a necessary item that everybody has asked for that. And then interconnectivity within development and also possibly the adjacent roadways. Now, there's a couple of them that we asked for. For example, sidewalks were needed along the frontages. And as you know, Huntington Road is, there's a very steep embankment, if you would call it, or berm, and it's wooded currently. To be able to put the sidewalk, you really have to grade quite a bit down and remove a lot of trees from that section, including a lot of trees in the right of way, not just on the property. So maybe Mr. Cal could put the plan back, maybe the color plan or the existing condition. Phase line, either one of the plans. So if you could see the gray line, go back to the other one if you don't mind. The one with the phase had the contours. One more back. Okay, that one. So if you could scoot down to see that part, yes, sir, right there. So you could see the contours, how steep it is, and all that is wooded. It's actually providing a great buffer from that side towards the mall. So to implement the sidewalk construction on that end will remove a lot of those trees that we wanted to keep, a lot of that berm more of a buffer. So we're willing to work with the staff and see, what would be the best way to address those kind of issues. So some of those waivers will really get deleted or not be necessary, but we will have some that we would be requested due to the condition of the site and also being able to preserve some of the trees and the buffers.
About 1 minute, Abe.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So the intent here is really to fit this into a site that's already developed but improved. But the need is great for the community to have this kind of product. Really, there's a need for residential. There's a need for the type of commercial service-oriented product that we're putting here. By adding the grocery store, daycare, everything, even possibly, hopefully, the police precinct will move as well into one of those sections in the building to be preserved. We're really trying to provide a full circle on this. So we've also looked at some bike lanes, paths along certain routes through the project that would be main route. And in terms of roadways, we will look at possibility of either doing private street or public street. But again, that we'll discuss that with the county staff. I think you should know that we have several department heads that would be meeting with us via WebEx or Zoom to discuss the items that were listed and issues and concerns that were listed on the staff report. So we wanted to make sure when we do discuss that, improve the plan, upgrade it, and bring it back to you, it is the closest we can to meeting a lot of the requirements. I think one issue, Mr. Griffin,
10 minutes.
Madam Chair, how much I've got? I'm sorry.
Actually, we're a little bit past.
Could you finish that thought and we'll.
I just going to wrap up that, we're going to be working with the staff to address a lot of the concerns or issues we're putting in. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Okay, next we'll move to our public comment portion. Thank you to all of you who are in the auditorium. I've heard that there are people outside of the auditorium as well. So would anyone like to wish to speak in favor of this proposal?
My name is Don Nepa. Excuse me, I live in High Ridge subdivision. And parking or traffic is an issue. And I don't believe all of a sudden about reducing traffic out there. Atlanta Highway is a mess. Timothy Road is a mess. Mitchell Bridge Road is a mess. You're looking at putting a Lidl across the street from Aldi's. That's even more people coming. And if you do a lot of stuff with the mall itself, you're going to attract more people. They're not coming to the mall now because there's nothing there. I don't understand how it can reduce traffic in any way, shape, or form. I just don't. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And could I ask the applicants, when you get to the podium, if you could state your name, address, and the nature of your interest in the project, if you have a connection to it?
Ed Robinson, 255 Deerfield Road. I'm a former county commissioner in this area before Jerry. And I know Jesse over here and George by Carl. This is actually, I spent a lot of time, Jerry's my neighbor. We spent a lot of time looking at the mall. So this is pretty much exactly the kind of project we envision seeing there. But in order for this to go ahead, so I'll ask you to table it. We are very much in favor, but we would want to first. There are traffic issues along the Huntington neighborhood that were violated from promises from the original mall. We'd like to see about getting those corrected. There has been a lot of planning on how to change traffic out there. So we'd like to see that, go back and look at this plan and see how the city can work with the developers to make sure we make some of these changes. In particular, we had a plan which would have made the overall commercial area out there much more viable by introducing a grid work connecting the mall to some of the other areas. I also think that this would add a lot of value for the investors. So I'd like to look forward to where I'm talking with Abe and the investors about this in the future. We also have T-Splosh coming up in the future. It'd be nice to make sure that whatever's going to be happening with the T-Splosh projects out there, again, they align with this project. Finally, that's going to work also if we can finally get Carl hated this, but I've been a big proponent of the flyover to connect I think it's East Huntington over to the Oconee connector. We really can only bring retail viability back there by connecting to that part. So there's a lot of infrastructure that's sort of halfway in the works. We'd like to get connecting to this project. Again, I'm very supportive of this project. I believe Jesse's, he'll say what he feels like, was pretty happy with it. But there's a lot of work we have to do. So would like to make sure we move forward now that this is public together. Finally, a question for staff. It used to be that you would have plats and stuff, just as Xeroxes of them on the table when people came here. You guys still do that?
We can bring some out for you if you'd like.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, thanks again. Looks good so far.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I take this off to speak?
To speak.
Hello, my name is Jennifer McCauley, and my family and I live at 372 Chesterfield Road in the Huntington Park neighborhood, just behind the mall. And thanks again for valuing citizens' comments. I appreciate it a lot. It's been really heartbreaking to watch a lot of the businesses leave the mall. That's one of the main reasons we moved to this part of Athens, and we continue to shop at the mall almost weekly. It's incredibly convenient, and we've enjoyed the new businesses that have opened there, like the lemonade and hot dog and company and the martial arts and several new businesses. So in my mind, I don't know if it's feasible, but I wish that the mall could just be revitalized. I mean, I know malls are declining in many places, but the Mall of Georgia is a success story. So perhaps there are some things we could model for our mall to make it once again the bustling place that it once was. I'm extremely worried about adding so many residential components to the new plan. Again, traffic is a major concern already, and it's a pretty pristine, not pristine, but peaceful and serene area behind the mall. And Atlanta Highway is incredibly congested, and I just can't imagine how adding so many more homes, apartments could, it would certainly make the condition worse. So very concerned about the number of residences proposed, and also concerned about the waiver of the number of shade trees, the tree canopy. That's concerning. If there's any way, if a new development does come in to preserve some of these older growth trees that are there now from the 80s, that would be ideal. And again, if the mall can't be revitalized and basically the situation it's in now, I would really urge everyone to consider the proposal made by Allison Huff, who also is a resident in my neighborhood. She has a brilliant and creative proposal for locating the Georgia Museum of Natural History, which is in desperate need of a facility, to this site. And we could have all sorts of other complementary projects that really make it a destination and not just more apartments and more commercial, which we have available to us all around. But her proposal introduces a dog park, a splash pad, again, the Museum of Natural History and IMAX Theater, something that would really make it unique to Athens and a win-win for the local people and for the city and its tourism as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak about the proposal?
Yes, I believe there is.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready, sir.
My name is Walter Cook, Walter Cook, and I live at 105 Yorkshire Road in the Huntington Park subdivision. About 1 mile from the mall. It's an easy walk, even along Cleveland Road, which does not have sidewalk. About all I know about this, I don't know a lot, because all I know is what was in the newspaper. And it got my attention. with this proposed 4-story apartment house. I didn't hear anything about that tonight because I couldn't read most of that stuff you had up there. A 4-story building would be completely out of place in the mall area. We would hope that it would be, if it was going to be demolished or part of it, that it would be replaced by a park. We don't have any parks in West Athens along that highway. We're gonna get one up at Talisay Road, about 10 miles away. But we could use a green space with walkways, trees. The map showed a lot of trees putting in, but they don't have any pattern to them. They just scatter everywhere. A good park designer would be a good addition to their staff. The trees would have open spaces, closed spaces, no natural area. I have some questions. I couldn't see the map very well, and I couldn't hear the narrator very well. Does this proposal affect the theater building that's there now?
Yes,
It'll deny as well. And the array of dumpsters, which is near there. I use the dumpsters.
30 seconds, sir.
Does the property abut the pond behind the dumpsters? In other words, the pond edge will be available to the public to see, walk along and so forth. That's good. Anyway, they will be available from the present location of the parking area.
Time, sir. Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Yeah. I'm Rebecca Weck. I live at 166 Deer Hollow Road, and I appreciate all the neighbors that showed up here with our concerns. I'm just going to reiterate some of the things they say. One thing, my major concern is traffic. I don't see how this is going to have less traffic than what we have now, since the mall is only 43%, I believe he said, occupied. To me, I can't see the commission approving this without some kind of definite traffic study and impact done for that area. The other thing is, I would like to see this is a great opportunity for this mall to be redeveloped and to enhance Athens, not make it, well, let's just cram a bunch of apartments in there and restaurants and bars and it'll be sold then and we won't have the mall anymore. It'd be nice to do something that would enhance Athens. And I as this is proposed, it's getting there, but I would like to see more to make it more park space and more make it a destination than just commercial space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'm James Ricks. I live on 341 Mealer Circle in the Lake Mealer neighborhood directly behind the mall. I just want to make sure that the green zone of the natural area that's behind the mall is preserved, along with talking about keeping all the canopy that we could on the Huntington roadside. I want to see that preserved also behind the mall. That's a huge concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I believe that's all, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll open it up. Mr. Abdurrahman, Sorry if I,
Thank you,
Think
Madam
right.
Chair. Abe, it's
you
fine.
do have the 2 minutes if you would like to respond to something.
Yes, ma'am, I would like to. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think a lot of the concern, as I mentioned, as far as traffic, the site is already zoned CG with the use of commercial. So, to go and develop that site without going through this, mixed use PD, you're going to generate a lot more traffic. And we have done a preliminary traffic study and submitted it to the staff, and we will do a final traffic study, obviously with the update of the plan. So the concerns on the Atlanta Highway are regional, as I mentioned. That's a state concern. That's a GDOT project that they're implementing very soon, we hope. And we will be tied into their network properly as they had planned, and we will show that on the updated master plan. So traffic is really a regional concern. We're doing less impact. We would do less impact from this site by implementing the mixed use project. So people got to understand it is not a green, full of treetop development here. It is a CG developed project. So we're doing our part to help that situation, and that's what we want to make the assurance for the community. I think it's difficult to comprehend that part in terms of, well, you're putting buildings and you're putting more out there, but really we're taking out as well. And in the overall scheme, we are reducing the amount of traffic. I think in terms of the question regarding the green space behind the mall or at the back of the mall, the only area we are going to be touching, unless the TAD agreement is reached to expand and make a park back there, we would be only dealing with the stormwater facility that's there now, addressing that to meet current codes. And there's another one we added, showed on the plan on the right side, a small area for a possible stormwater management facility, because current standards require additional measures. So in terms of the dumpsters, of course, they're not going to stay. We are going to put the recycling and waste containers and enclosures as required throughout the site. And so that area, of course, will be cleaned out and cleaned up and removed. The 4-story concern, obviously in the CG zone, there's a 65 feet maximum as far as building height. It's allowed, excuse me. In terms of really trying to put a museum there, it's just, this is not a plan that would be able to take that kind of use on the property. We feel like the TAD possibility of adding a park in the back of that, in that green space area, and enhancing the pond and having retention pond instead of just detention will enhance that and be able to be used by the public. So in terms of that kind of question, I believe I have covered most of the concern. I don't know if I missed anything. Brad?
No,
Yes, sir.
so I'd let you go a little past the 2 minutes because you were addressing some of the questions of the citizens that were in the audience. So, yeah.
Yes. Well, I do appreciate that. So I think in terms of looking at this possibility, and I know what we have now, certain amount of tree covers. Again, we provided 8 acres of green space in addition to what they have there. There's not a whole lot there, okay? And the trees that are mature, we definitely want to save them, and every possibility. Just like I mentioned along Huntington Road, there's no reason to take a bunch of trees. If we can put a sidewalk certain ways that folks could access without removing that buffer and those trees, it would make sense. And that's the discussion we want to have with the county staff in terms of meeting certain requirements. Water, sewer easements, we're going to deal with that obviously when we finalize, and we'll be glad to put a statement to meet that kind of ordinance. In terms of the concern about the residential buildings added, to make a mixed use, you have to have that mixture. You have component of residential, commercial, service, grocery, and you have to have interconnectivity and really walkability along that. Now, the project provides quite a bit of amenities. As you saw on the color plan, we have a lot of amenities provided in various sections. But we will be adding more in terms of green space, open plaza, public plaza that would be enjoyed by any. And this transit, of course, station will be provided so we can have that ability to bring folks in, not just for who lives there, but others in the community. Madam Chair, I'll be glad to answer any questions for the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Abu Hamdan will do better the job this
Very
time.
good. You did great. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will move to our discussion amongst planning commissioners. Would anyone like to kick us off? Lucy.
I'm going to try and keep this short, even though it can't be. My first comment is don't let this be a missed opportunity for Athens-Clarke County. The mall was built back about 1980. It drained all of that commercial out of downtown. Downtown became dead. This is a chance to redo another downtown. And Abe Abahundan, and I know who you are.
Very good.
Yes, you know me, I know you.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a perfect opportunity to recreate a downtown, not another commercial development that the mall was. And Jerry Neesmith and I talked about this for years, but it wasn't about the mall. It was about the mall as being an anchor downtown that went west, and all of it had a grid, just like you have in typical Athens. Athens around the university is a grid. If the mall, quote unquote, is considered to be a new downtown, essentially an auxiliary downtown, because Athens has grown so much, it's a grid. And everything west of that is a grid. And Jerry and I talked about that for years. And the reason that the Atlanta Highway is such a mess is because GDOT and local transportation people kept widening it. And it doesn't need to be widened anymore, please. Let's never again put another lane on that. What it really needs, and this goes from the property that Abe is talking about, west, on the north side, which is where the mall is now, you have another parallel road that removes traffic from the Atlanta Highway and would also channel the traffic from this redeveloped downtown, I'm saying downtown for everybody's benefit, to the north of the current Atlanta Highway. So that's something I'd like to throw out there. I do agree that putting the Georgia Museum of Natural History out there doesn't make a lot of sense. Those kinds of things, if you think about any big city or even a small city, those kinds of attractions are always in your original downtown. If this thing turns out to be something else, okay, I can agree with that. Right now, though, the way this is being designed, and this is not the property owners' problem. It's not the designer's problem. That's the hand they've been dealt. They have that property, and that's all they have. Athens-Clarke County has done Zippo to look at the property west of that, going towards Cleveland Road. And that's the fault of Athens-Clarke County. Not the fault of the owner of this mall, not the fault of the developer. This project right now is self-contained because of that. This planning commission and the county commission need to look at the property starting at, well, actually it's farther east than that, farther west than that. They need to start looking at property in very large amount or parts and say, what are we going to do with all of this? How are you going to design all of this? So I'm not critical of this particular design so much as the need to look at this very large parcel of property that goes well beyond what the old mall is and how it's all going to be incorporated. You can't keep developing things in pods that are self-contained. If you do, you will just keep getting self-contained little pods. And I just feel like this is an opportunity that can't be missed. And Abe, thank you very much for bringing this to us. I think it's a good start. And I think it's something that needs to get the community kicked into gear as to how we're going to develop that part of the county. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Jim?
I'd like to reiterate some of what Lucy said. It strikes me that this is a start, but that it's not imaginative enough, and it skimps on some key amenities that would be crucial to making it successful, including, and that could actually be selling points of it. For example, more green space, shade trees, and including in the parking lot. As global warming keeps continuing, parking lots keep baking hotter and hotter, and adding shade trees in the parking lot costs a lot of money up front, but it will make a lot of people a lot happier in the future once this thing is a going operation. More public plazas are needed, and I particularly liked the mention by the developer of the idea of office or workspace so that people could live close to their places of business, but there isn't really much of a serious effort to incorporate actual such opportunities for people to have offices, workspaces, et cetera, that could tie into their local community. So I would strongly urge you to look further into that, but don't skimp now because that's going to cost you in the long run.
Thank you, Jim. Who's next? Matt, and then Alice.
Yeah, I'm generally supportive of some of the ideas in this application. I think, Athens needs a great deal more housing, and I think this is a wonderful parcel to provide some of that. I basically agree with a lot of what Lucy said and what Jim said, though, in terms of that the design here seems like a bad land use for Athens-Clarke County to me. It looks a lot like Oconee Center, if that's what it's called, where the movie theater and the Gap and those stores are located, where it's so pedestrian unfriendly that if you stop at the shoe store, you then have to drive 500 feet to the pub to have a meal and then drive 500 feet and park in another spot to, go to the clothing store. And so I agree with Lucy that the sort of downtown idea with a grid with walkable streets and bikeable streets would be a far better land use here. I feel like this project is in some ways a little bit unambitious and a little bit, there's no sense of place in what I saw in these drawings. It just feels like anywhere or nowhere in the United States, and it doesn't provide the sort of green space, public walkways, public plazas, pedestrian walkways, transit amenities. I think it would be very important to have a multimodal center on this site so that, if you're going to house a couple thousand people out there, some of those people are going to work in downtown Athens, and they may not want to drive to work and drive back. And if there's a bunch of them, then, it would certainly support sort of express bus service for people to get back and forth there, and for people who live in Athens to go out there and patronize the commercial stuff and that you would be building on site. And so I think transit amenities would be a critical part of any development here. I also just wanted to say I agreed with about everything in the staff report in terms of some of what I've just said: transit, pedestrian plazas, walkways, et cetera, more trees, more landscaping in the multifamily areas, et cetera, just the various areas of concern that the staff report identifies on page 7. I was sympathetic to just about all of those. You know, I guess the last thing I'll say, one of the applicant's waivers, and this is really just symptomatic of a general car dependence and an orientation towards people coming and going by car for every aspect of this, the residents and the commercial patrons. The idea of waiving half of the required bicycle parking spots just struck me as kind of shocking. It's a small thing, but you know, there's a lot of people who live around there who might bike in to go to the restaurant and bike home. And there may be a lot of people who would, as this area redevelops, who would live there and ride their bikes to other places. And it doesn't feel very bike friendly out there now, but this is a large development. And I think the idea of waiving some of the bike, you know, I think our ordinance standards for required bike parking are very low. It's like 1 bike spot for every 20 car parking spots. And it struck me as shocking to request a waiver for something like that, and just kind of indicative of a lack of imagination and a car focus, a vehicle traffic focus in many aspects of this development, including, sorry, my dogs are barking, including you know, just the general site plan. And I'll mute now so you don't have to listen to the dogs. Sorry.
Alice and then Katie.
Actually, Matt, I couldn't hear your dogs, but I can hear mine. Actually, Matt just said everything that I was going to say and more. But let me just, for the sake of the applicant, emphasize that it is the car-oriented aspect of this design that that is making me uncomfortable, even while I agree that that the mall site is a great place for, you know, much more housing and you know, quality commercial that would serve that development and the neighborhood. But if it feels like I'm going to Matt gave the good example, the Coney Center or whatever it's called, which I do shop at sometimes. But if I want to get something at Ulta and then I want to get something at Bed Bath & Beyond, I get in my car. So that's the overarching thing that I would like to communicate, is that the car orient look of this site plan is unattractive.
Katie? Oh, Katie might
I
be
agree
frozen.
thoroughly what everyone has said very well. Oh, can you
You're
hear me?
good, Katie. Yep, we can. You're good.
Okay. Yeah, I really agree strongly with what everyone else has said before. This site is big enough so that it doesn't have to be car oriented. There could be an internal space that is really human scale and welcoming to people walking and walking. Just on a kind of a fun note, I just measured downtown Athens, and if you include the original core between Pulaski and Thomas and Doherty and Broad, plus the first quad of North Campus, it's the same size as this site. So there's plenty of room to make a really human-oriented place there. And yeah, that means, again, human scale. I was okay with a lot of the elevations, you know, buildings that frame the streets, that frame the public spaces. That's what good urbanism is. More green space. I'm always going to vote for preserving the tree canopy and for reducing parking. And I think, as some have said, having a really nice transit station will do something to reduce the traffic impacts of adding a lot of people here. Lucy mentioned the lack of planning by the county, and I also wanted to point out how useful it would be if we had a unified vision for this area of town that was informed by a market study, so we knew what we were asking and was coordinated with the transportation plan. And finally, I'm not sure you all know, but we have an expert in retrofitting suburbia in Atlanta. I'm sure Lucy knows. And you can look at retrofittingsuburbia.com to find a list of hundreds of mall retrofits. And, you know, they're all a little different. There's some great examples. They're really good critiques. And that's it for now. Thanks.
Thanks. Kristen.
Yeah, so again, a lot of my notes had to deal with connectivity through the site and like, you know, getting away from the car focused things that people are saying. I think maybe the one thing I would add to what's been said is, you know, I get, like when I first saw this pop up and I was like, oh, I was remembering there was a study that was done of this corridor years ago. And it was specifically said, like, we need to put some sort of live work, like redevelop the mall. And I was like, yay, this is a study that actually like predicted something that might actually happen. But the more I think about it, so like, not that I'm necessarily going to hold anything in Gwinnett up to like a high standard, whatever, but I went to Sewanee years ago for a concert, and they have this big amphitheater in the middle of like their sort of created downtown area. And it got me thinking, like, this could be a great, you know, I recognize the issues of putting a park out here and using that space, but right now the space is so concrete, not just on the mall property, but everything around that section of Atlanta Highway. And so to create something that had some sort of draw, that had a natural element to it, that could bring people through the space, I just thought, you know, it's one thing to develop the mall and make an impact by developing the mall, but in 5 or 10 or 15 years, what kind of lasting impact is that going to go beyond that? So it's a great, you know, feat to just redevelop the mall. But now let's think about down the road, how are we going to create something that people are really going to be like, oh, wow, this is a destination. So, thanks.
Thank you. Joey? Joey, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. The first thing I'll say is, you know, I'd love to see the GDOT plans kind of overlaid so we can kind of see how that's going to impact the area with the potential or future flyover of 360 of the loop, or, you know, how that connects with Jennings Mill and all that. So I would love to see that, to see how that would impact this. Also, you know, a lot of what people have said, you know, when I look at this project and when people talk about the mall, and when I've always looked at the mall, I envision an area like Alpharetta. If you've been to Alpharetta and seen how they've done their downtown area, how they've done the, I believe it's Avalon, I think it's what it's called. That area, it's a lot of walkable, and Lucy, I think, hit the nail on the head when she led off with, this is a great opportunity for Athens and the walkable area. When I first look at this and I see all the parking and everything's kind of pushed out, I just had heartburn with that I just feel like, you know, if someone lives out on these outskirts and they've got to walk across 6 lanes of parking to get to where, you know, a restaurant or shopping or their job, you know, if they want it to be walkable, I feel like the plan could be a little more walker friendly to move buildings around. You know, I had a question with the existing building that you're leaving there. Are you going to open it up? Is that now going to be a kind of an open air type facility, or what's going to be left there? But I do feel like, you know, and I have no problem. I wouldn't want to see reducing trees. I like having the trees there. I think that we could definitely reduce the parking here. But overall, you know, I do like the vision. I think this is a great opportunity for Athens. It's a great opportunity that y'all have presented us. And I just think that with a little work, a little tweaking here and there, I think it could really be great.
Thank you. Anyone else? I had a few comments I wanted to, oh, I'm sorry, go, did I see another hand somewhere? Monique, and then Lucy?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say I really like the proposal. I think it's a fresh presentation for Athens. I also kind of envision this to be very similar to a Pond City Market, in that there's the residential space as well as the commercial space. And then I just I think it lends itself to a lot of creativity and bringing different people, multi-generational people to the area. I didn't see areas that kind of cater to children, like play areas, but that may be there. I just haven't seen that. So, but if it's not there, I think that's something to consider, because as a parent moving here 10 years ago, that was one of the things that I looked for, and it was pretty hard to find.
Great, thank you. Lucy?
Katie brought up that I happen to know somebody, and she knows somebody in Atlanta who's an expert on this. Let me see if I can do it right. Ellen Dunham Jones is the former director, or she may still be the director of the architecture program at Georgia Tech. And her book, Retrofitting Suburbia, is award-winning internationally. And she'd love to come up here. And the other person who is not going to come up here, but I wish he would, is Leon Creer, who has beautiful renditions of what cities should be like. He's European, and I'm sure Katie knows who he is as well, and probably knows him, actually. But there are lots of models out there already, and I don't think Athens-Clarke County needs to be doing pods. I think we need to be looking at things as a much broader picture, and that's how I've always looked at this, and I've been doing this now for over 20 years. I would really like to see us do this right. And Abe is a good guy, and Abe knows what he's doing, believe me.
Thank you.
All people in this community need, who are professionals, is guidance from Athens-Clarke County. If Athens-Clarke County gives them the guidance, they'll go with it. Believe me, they will run with it.
Kristen?
Sorry, just real quick, I did forget to mention, I don't know if it's possible the next time that this comes before us, I know that this is going to be built in phases. And one thing I found when I was going through the different plans, there was the one that had all the different phases all together on it. And I wasn't sure if it was possible, even if it's just a regular 8.5 by 11 size, to get something that just shows like, here's phase 1, here's phase 2, here's phase 3, just because they were all starting to mush together for me. And it was hard for me to figure out what this development was going to look like as it started to pop up on the site. So however it comes forth the next time, maybe just keep that in mind. So
Thanks. I'll make a few comments and then someone else can go. I pretty much agree with a lot of what my colleagues have said. I just wanted to make a few points. First, kudos to the planning staff. I thought they did a good job with this report, and I agreed with everything they put in their report, and just would like to underscore some of those things or add a couple of things. Everyone, I think, has talked about green spaces, and I couldn't agree more. I think about that in terms of, when I like the idea of a development like this on this site. I'm really intrigued by Katie bringing up sort of the equivalent size of this site, of what, this is basically a site that's similar in size to our current downtown. But, for a site that's as large as that, we really do need green spaces for residents and visitors. Like, what I didn't see on the plans is dog parks and the things that people, this many thousands of people who would be living here, places for them to sort of live, hang out, recreate, meet up with each other. And I think that gets to it's probably my largest point about the proposal, which is that, we look at planned development applications for sites way smaller than this with much more detail than we have here. And I realize this is a preliminary set of plans, but, I can't even see, like, there was a page on the plans where there's several pages of concept imagery. The very last page of concept imagery shows these really great amenities. It sort of gives you the vibe of like Atlantic Station or something like that, or even something done a little bit better than Atlantic Station, really. But where you see, like, one of the photos shows people sitting sitting on a lawn on picnic blankets with tables and then a little stage. And with the exception of maybe there's one space on the plan where I think that kind of thing might could happen. I feel like that is such a large site that there's multiple places where that can happen. So the green spaces for where people, a lot of the green space type of uses that you represent on your last plate of concept imagery, I love that. I don't see it on the actual plan. Like we would need so much more detail about that. As far as the tree canopy requirement goes, again, it's about the quality of the experience on the site. So right now the trees are kind of even. When you really measure it out, you've drawn really large trees on the site. They're kind of evenly spaced, but a little bit more thought. I mean, we have planned developments where we're given species lists. I mean, we can get to that sort of detail. I don't know if I'm so much hung up on that, but certainly getting at sort of a diversity of trees and how they would, not put them on the site just to satisfy a requirement, but putting them on the site to create this experience for people living and visiting there. And I know it's a concrete jungle now, but to me that doesn't justify continuing it as that for the reasons I just said. The other couple of things I wanted to say, and this kind of relates to what I was saying before, just real detail of if you put your over 55 age restricted development in the place where the current movie theater is, that feels a little segregated to me in the sense that I don't really know what the intent behind that is, but I don't think I would put age restricted units in a way that's kind of exterior to the site or on the edges of the site. To me, there's no reason why that can't be interior to the site. And looking at, while I'm on the subject of the age-restricted building or set of buildings, I really think it's worth considering your unit mix. I don't think that I think people forget that like older people as they're retiring or downsizing, they're actually looking for 2 and 3 bedrooms. I knew very few people who are, if you have a couple, an older couple, although I'm looking at the face of the 50s and I'm having a hard time imagining myself in an age-restricted development. But let's say that I were doing something like that, I would want 3 bedrooms. Like I just helped my parents downsize. They felt like they wanted to still be able to entertain a guest and have a room for a sewing room / other place to be. So I think it's really worth, like I had written down, I think that you only have you have a very small number of 3-bedroom units in your age restricted. And I think in general, I think it's really worth thinking about what's your real market for 1-bedroom apartments, because I don't know if it's as large as the unit mix in this development would make it seem to be. I think it's worth thinking about. I mean, we talk about bedroom size, bedroom count quite a bit, and here I am sort of arguing for more bedroom count, but I think what we're usually talking about there is when we see a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom apartment, all of our flags go up because it means it's a student development. So I would just encourage you to consider more 2- and 3-bedroom units. I think for me, besides the problem of not having enough detail for a site of this size, my biggest critique of this development is that for a mixed-use development, I don't see any vertical mix. So I see like a house or a building with residential units, and then a building that's labeled for restaurant / retail. There's a reason for the ground floor commercial retail requirement in the CG zone, and it is to encourage the vertical mix. So like when I look at, again, that last plate of concept imagery, when you really look at those images that you've chosen to share your vision with us, they actually show a lot of ground floor. It's not just that it's not this building's this one use and this other building's this other use. There's way more mixing within one building. And so I think it's really worth looking at that. And I think when Lucy and Katie were talking about these resources you can consult as you move forward. There's a lot about that and those resources. I think, last thing, on the plans, I don't know if my set of plans was incomplete or if this is just not in here, but I don't see any detail really for how the kind of how the retail / commercial boxes will be used. Like in my view, they just appear as these kind of boxes on the plan, but I would really want to sort of get a sense for what the intent is with those spaces. And despite the fact that I know you don't know who your tenants would be, I think there's still a form, there's still a style that you want to create. Like, for example, is one of the remaining mall buildings going to be an interior 2-story mall type thing? Like, I wasn't really clear on that. So I just think we're missing a lot of detail, but the idea of this kind of use on this site in general is the direction I think a lot of folks want to see us go. So anyway, I'll wrap up my comments. Does anyone else want to add to that? Taylor?
Hey, good evening. I think this is a great idea. I love it. But I do, however, I'm kind of like Christian. I do think it's a quick fix to what we want, what we're looking for now out of the area. I would like to see something that is going to keep people coming back 20 plus years from now, keep it attractive. Also in the development, I'd like for you to consider the neighbors, their privacy, those neighborhoods surrounding the area, try to keep them their privacy. I also think that there should be a multimodal space because like someone stated before, there will be a lot of people probably going to travel into town, going to work, whatnot, try to save gas. So, and I'd like for this space I'd like to see it be a lot more family friendly environment. Like we've been saying, walking space. But I do think you're definitely on the right track for what could be something special for the county. So,
Thank you. Anyone else? Matt?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing for Abe. In terms of positive feedback, one of your big waivers is the parking reduction, and I just wanted to, since I haven't heard anyone speak to that, it was more constructive criticism and feedback. I would have no problem with the parking reduction. I fully understand why you're seeking it, and the residential and commercial uses are likely to need their parking spaces to some extent at different times of day. And so I'm all for it. And I just wanted to get that out there because as you continue to revise and refine, I imagine that a parking waiver is going to continue to be part of what you're asking for. And I'm generally speaking, I think our parking minimums are, if a developer says, I don't need as many parking spaces as that, I'm inclined to agree, to believe you. And so I have no problem with the parking reduction that you requested, or even with a larger one if necessary, as you continue to refine this proposal.
Thank you. Anyone else? I had a question for the applicant. You mentioned that these would all be rental. What is the reason for that? I'm sure you've kind of thought about whether some of these would be condo style. Is that having to do with just the financial picture, or?
Well, it's really, Madam Chair, it's both financial picture, but also to maintain local ownership and really continuity throughout the project. So it's always well maintained, well manicured, well kept. But you got local investors here, and they want to stay in it, and they want to make it, their project to be for a lifetime. So I think there's a lot of that emotion in it, that they want to keep really that control. So it's not somebody else doing something else in the building next door or in the front. So they want to keep that quality up, and that's the main reason. And I think there's a lot need for rental space versus, condos and houses at this stage, so, in the community. So.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, if I just could have, I'd just like to summarize what I understand just in general. If I could have a couple of minutes, it's up to you, of course.
Yes, go ahead.
So I wanted to tell you the reason this project goes through preliminary development process, is for input from y'all as well as the community, as well as the staff and other department staff as well. So, we've heard loud and clear, sort of repeated multiple times, the open space, the public space, the multimodal transit station, the trees, additional trees, tree canopy, landscape areas, the walkability, both pedestrian and, of course, bicycle paths as well, incorporated. And I just also want to clarify, we did say that we are providing all the bicycle parking spaces, but the reason we asked for the waiver, we understood that it may have to be paved. We were trying to reduce the amount of pavement, but now we understand that we could be in a landscape area or in a grass area or, so you can't put a bike just outside the pavement rack or whatnot. So we're perfectly fine, but that was our reason. It's not because we didn't want to provide it. We're trying to minimize the amount of impervious. So in terms of, as far as the layout and looking at more of an approach that will look more like a downtown street and whatnot, we're going to try to do as much we can with that. There are limitations on site in terms of topography, in terms of existing building to remain. And we want to try to get as close to that as possible. We're reworking the plan. One reason you had asked about the active adults in the back, I mean, we have tried different ways before, and it seemed like they like to be close, but not in the middle of the mix, just because they like the quietness. They could, come into the mix if they wish to, as long as they're not too far. So that's the one reason from market studies and other projects that seems to be fit the best in terms of active adults. But a lot of great comments. I do appreciate all of you for providing, whether it's, constructive criticism or, on the plus side, positive side. So we welcome those, and we want to come back to you, hopefully with much better plan, more listening in tune of what the community and y'all have provided and the staff. Now, there's some certain things we will work with the staff and department heads to see if we can have a win-win plan, because there's a certain degree that if this development, it's going to cost in the tune of close to $500 million when completed. So a value that's staggering to even comprehend at this stage. So it has to make sense also for the owners that this is a project that would make sense for them to invest that kind of money. That has to be fruitful both ways. But I think we've got a lot of notes here from all of you, and we do appreciate all of your input. And we'll also look at some of the comments came in from the area citizens or community and see if we can address some of that as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Is there anyone else on the commission who wishes to speak to this item? Katie. We'll give Katie a second.
That happened. I had one really small question. I noticed a lot of the comments were from people who said how much they enjoyed exercising in the mall, walking, and was wondering about the decision to reduce the size of that building. I mean, normally I'm a fan of smaller blocks, but in this case, it might almost be an amenity. So I just wanted to ask the applicant why they're taking down some of the original mall building.
Yeah. So the main reason why, because it's 46% occupied currently. It's just they have not been able to land uses or tenants to utilize the space. So we have to reconfigure to really redevelop the mall to revitalize it. We have to make it active again. We have to make it more interesting. So having the mall just to walk in is not really ideal to say we're just going to have a big mall, big box that's empty of stores 46% occupied, so people can walk inside the mall of a huge space. Now, what we think would be ideal is having shade trees, proper sidewalks, really interactive open space areas that really invite people not to walk indoors, walk outdoors. So that's why, the section we're taking out is really taking the part less than what's empty currently and reutilize the existing to keep existing tenants, local tenants, and that's the idea behind that. So,
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Anyone else? Okay, so just as a reminder to those in the auditorium who came to speak to this item, we will not take a vote tonight. Tonight is purely to give that feedback to the developer or to the applicant. And we thank you to the applicant for your
Thank you.
time, and we look forward to seeing this again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is the voluntary inclusionary zoning text amendment. So we start with a staff report there.
Yes, and I'm going to give that staff report, and I'll start off by giving you a little background on how this came about and how it came to you. This document that was prepared was put together by a working group appointed by the mayor. It consisted of 6 members and then with some staff assistance and resources. The members were 2 planning commissioners, Matt Hall and Alice Kinman, Commissioners Tim Denson and Mariah Parker, Heather Benham from the Land Trust, and Rick Parker from the Athens Housing Authority. Along with that was your 6-member working group that just did a ton of work. They were supported by Sherry Hines and Lisa Pappas of the Attorney's Office, Nikki Jones from the Manager's Office, Haley Banerjee from Housing and Community Development, and then Rick and myself from the Planning Department. And this group started working, probably March or April of this past year. Met on 2-week cycles for many, many months. They did a lot of research. They asked for a lot of information. They went through several iterations of drafts, and what they have presented to you tonight is really what they view as being the first phase of what would be a 2-phase process. As you guys have all seen from looking at this particular inclusionary zoning ordinance only relates to multifamily rental property at this point. It's just from the research and the resources, the rental market seemed to be the logical first place to try to implement this type of an ordinance and to try to iron out issues that the group recognized early on that there is really no magic bullet as it relates to density bonus percentage or affordability percentage. They did the research and they have come to you with their best recommendation, but they also recognize very openly that there will be a need to go back and continually revisit this and see if it's not working, and if not, is it why, and do we need to modify numbers? They also tried to work very hard to the issue of, do you require developments to provide the housing on site, or do you allow for a much more flexible inclusionary payment in lieu process across the board than providing the units? The working group's recommendation to you tonight is to really only allow consideration of payment in lieu instead of building the units in the commercial downtown area based on the scale of the projects that would typically be built in downtown. The other zones, which were RM1, 2, and 3, and then the other commercial zones, commercial office, commercial neighborhood, commercial general, those would they all carry percentage increases at varying percentages, and they would be required, if they choose to participate in the inclusionary density bonus, to provide the percentage of units on site in a mixed element. I know there were some questions as you read through the ordinance. All those units are to be the same as the market rate units. They're to be interspersed with the market rate units. They're not all to be put over in one corner by themselves. A lot of those kind of design elements and aspects that were based in part on a lot of research. They looked at the city of Decatur's ordinance. They looked at the city of Milton as two in Georgia. They also looked at Chapel Hill and other places around the country and pulled information together to create this draft that you have in front of you tonight. So I know that Jim had a few comments on those. I don't know at this point if you would like me to go through those. If y'all want to just open it up for comments and do that as a second part. I do kind of want to lead in with what I've just said and then allow Alice and Matt as two of the committee members who spent a ton of time on this to kind of answer on behalf of the working group many of the questions that you may have. It's their document. So I will just leave it at that. We feel like from a staff standpoint, the document is in a place where it is prepared to move forward, but also absolutely recognize you all's interest in it. And if you would, you're not being sternly asked to send it forward tonight. If you're comfortable sending it forward, great. But if you want a little more time with it, that's completely understandable too. So I'll stop talking and leave it at that.
And Alice or Matt, oh, good, you've got your hand up. I wanted to ask if you guys wanted to say anything before we get to the nitty gritty. So go ahead, Alice.
Yeah, just I do think that it would make sense to go ahead and go through Jim's comments because I think he raises some salient ones that other members of the Planning Commission probably would share. So it probably does help to just go through his comments. I was able to read them all. I hope others were as well. But let's just go through those and either Brad or me or Matt can address them, and then I would say let's hear from the rest of the commission. I just think that Jim's questions are probably going to be widely shared.
Okay. Are y'all able to see that?
Yes.
Okay. And some of his comments are, clarifications. Area median income needs to spell it out before using the acronym. We can certainly take care of that. The issue of the quotations, we'll work with our attorney's office certainly on that, on what's the best approach to that. Redundant word, absolutely. Moderate income households, that's an easy fix and a good catch. Jim, nothing popped up for me on this one, so I don't know if you remember what that was or.
There were a couple of comment marks put in because I hit the button at the wrong time, but there's no comment attached to them. Okay,
perfect. Affordable housing price, purchase or rental. I think that's a great question because the original draft document included owner occupied too. And the owner occupied gets into a completely more complex set of long-term regulatory measures than the rental does. And so the group, I think, wisely opted to go this route. They never went back and modified the purchase or rental at this point. And I don't know if that's something it's in the definition section. I don't know that it really impacts the regulation of the ordinance, but certainly something we can look at.
Well, is that just a wording thing? Go ahead, Alice.
If I may, I just maybe Lisa can address this. I think we just left that there because we are imagining a 2.0 that would include single-family residential. But
no, I think so too. I think that was the reason.
That makes sense to me. Oh, go for it, Matt. I can't see you all when the screen shares, so go ahead, Matt.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to say it's that definition is in there and is incorporated into a couple of other definitions, which is the only reason I think we might leave it. The very next thing that the IZ working group intends to work on is a for sale portion of the ordinance for owner occupied units. And so you'll notice that the definition right above affordable housing price of the word affordable says affordable means rented or sold, rented at an affordable rent or sold at an affordable housing price. And then further down, the word market rate is defined to mean rates that are not restricted to an affordable housing price or affordable rent. So just a few of our definitions do presume the impending and hopefully soon addition of a separate chapter of this ordinance that will be directed at owner-occupied and for sale units. Certainly, those three definitions could be tweaked right now to eliminate that, and we just have to remember to go back and put them in later. I think, Alice can speak for herself. I would say I'm sort of agnostic on that. I think we could leave them, knowing that they'll be, those definitions will be in use, hopefully not too many months down the road.
Agnostic, but maybe Lisa would like to comment, not to put any pressure on you, Lisa, but do you think it matters if it's in here or not?
No pressure. Thank you, Alice. I would advise leaving them in. And the reason I say that is kind of reiterate what Matt said, is that hopefully there is a 2.0 version coming soon. And I feel like a lot of people, when reading ordinances, even if there are changes, no one really goes back to the definitions portion. And I wouldn't want to lose out on that information and people knowing that in the beginning.
Okay. I think this next comment was a spell out of an acronym. We'll take care of that. This paragraph refers to 60% of AMI, but subsequent definition of very low is at 50% of AMI. This section will make it challenging for very low income category. And I believe, and I'm going to let Matt and Alice again on this one, I think we bounced back and forth a little bit between 50 and 60 on where we wanted to hit that number, but I think ultimately where the chart is at the 60%.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And that's a good catch by Jim. The definition of household, very low income on the next page still has the 50% number, which is an artifact. And so this definition that we're talking about is fine, but household very low income should be changed to say 60, just to conform it with a change that we made at a certain point in our discussion.
Yeah, and I agree with Jim's comment up here to insert Georgia State Department of Community Affairs. This should be changed to 60 instead of 50, as Matt just said.
Did you guys talk though about the HUD definition of very low? Like, isn't that 50?
Yeah, we did.
We just decided to define it differently locally.
I mean, I would have to go back and look at my notes in more detail than I did earlier today, but it really did have to do with how AMI is calculated. We decided to, y'all correct me if my memory is wrong about this, but we really decided to look at not the MSA AMI, but the more local AMI, because if you look at the MSA, then you get a Coney County involved in there, and that makes that number go up. So I think once we looked at the numbers generated by the 60%, that just seemed like the right targets for us. If you looked at 50%, including the whole MSA, then that number was higher than what we get at 60% locally. Please correct me, Brad, Matt, Lisa, if I am misremembering this.
Yeah, I don't remember it quite as specifically as you do, but everything that Alice said sounds correct to me. And I do remember we talked about this and went back and forth and ended up, I think it was because we were looking at different geographical areas. We did end up at 60% of the local rather than 50% of the metropolitan area, as it were.
And I think the other thing that I recall you all talking about at the local level, not including the entire MSA, was the ability or the opportunities, if you dropped it all the way to 50 based on the Athens-Clarke County numbers specifically, that it may become difficult to a point where we won't get any takers that will hit that, try to hit that lower number, that you start getting into those units being the ones that really need more of the assistance through our HCD and our federal grant opportunities, things like that, than being provided as part of a private development.
So
Yes,
have
I
you
think
defined in the ordinance which of those you're going to use, which AMI you're going to use? Is that in
Well, I
this
think
language
Jim-
somewhere? I missed it.
I think Jim's right. We need to make that correction. That's just something that we missed in our multiple iterations over this.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you think about percentage of AMI, you're really talking about the cost of the subsidy. And so we landed on 60%, and like all the numbers in this entire ordinance, they can be adjusted. Part of our recommendation is that this gets reevaluated every single year. It may be that we need to go to 50% or, but anyway, just want to throw that out. But we did have a reason for landing on 60%. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
This sounds like a Lisa question to me. What is sufficient proprietary interest in real property? Can an owner cease to be deemed an owner if proprietary interest becomes insufficient?
Can you pull that comment up again, Brad, so I can see the question?
Sure. Because I don't have an answer for that one.
I'm not sure what was meant by sufficient proprietary interest. I don't know if it's like a majority owning interest. I'd have to ask Sherry about that one.
Yeah, my main point is that it's ambiguous, and ambiguous definitions aren't too helpful.
We can take a look at that for sure.
Can I ask a question on that exactly?
Sure.
I have friends in the legal community statewide who deal with heirs interest, and how does this affect that? Does anybody, you all understand? I'm sure Lisa knows what I'm talking about. Do people understand heirs property on something like this?
Are you talking about heirs as in inheritors?
Yes, I'm talking about people who, you might have 50 people who own a piece of property.
I would, I mean, Lisa can go back and check with Sherry on this because the two of them worked really closely together on this text. I would assume that something like sufficient proprietary interest might have been something that came in from ordinances that we adapted from other places. And it may be to address exactly that issue, Lucy, that, you know, we need owners who clearly own. But that's my pure speculation.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The definition undoubtedly is something that Sherry, you know, in adapting different ordinances from different places that we had found in our research, liked this definition of owner. I agree with Jim. It's at best ambiguous because sufficient raises the question of what's sufficient. And so, you know, I think my inclination would actually be to just simplify it by just saying having a proprietary interest in real property. Anybody who owns a portion of real property is an owner. I think, Lucy, your point about heirs property, that's a very real issue in a lot of different contexts. I suspect probably not in the context of a development proposal that would incorporate, you know, a development proposal at all, because usually somebody who wants to do a development on a property that's owned by 50 different people has to figure out how to consolidate title before they would proceed and get anywhere near the point of invoking this ordinance and agreeing to this percentage of affordable units and so on. So it's a real issue, but maybe not one that this ordinance needs to be concerned with, is my sense. But that may be something that that Brad should, you know, bounce off Sherry tomorrow and just see if there's what thoughts you have. The last thing I'll say on that is I did a search for the word owner, and it only appears in one place in this ordinance. And so I'm not even sure we need to define owner. The only place it appears is in 927-9 sub B. Wait, 927-9, sorry, sub. Actually, the numbering in the version I'm looking at, it's the section titled Administration of Affordability for Rental Inclusionary Housing, right above the beginning of 927-10. It just says the owner has to certify the income of tenants to the Department of Community Housing. So I'm not sure it's a term that really needs to be defined in the ordinance. And so a simple solution to Jim's point about the ambiguous definition would be to delete the definition of owner. And I think the ordinance is no worse for that.
And then I've made a note to check with Sherry on that.
Oh,
If she's comfortable with
okay.
that, we're happy to do it.
I just want to make it clear that, you know, I have dealt with people around the state, not locally, concerning heirs. And Matt is by far much more knowledgeable about this than I could ever be in my entire life. So I just want to make it clear that I just wanted to bring it up when I saw this. Okay?
Perfect.
One comment I would make is just that if for some reason the attorney's office wants to keep this language in, I would be satisfied keeping it in and removing the word sufficient.
Okay.
It might be that they want something like that in there, even though it's kind of obvious, but maybe it's just one of those things you want to have back up in the ordinance in case there's any question.
Got it.
Yeah, and let me just add to that. I agree with that. I'd be happy to delete it, and also happy to. I think if we deleted the word sufficient, we would also need to delete everything after the word real property, because otherwise it reads a little funny. Having proprietary interest in real property to commence, maintain, and operate a development project. I don't think we need that final clause if we delete the word sufficient. But I'd be comfortable with it either way, and happy to. If we end up voting this out tonight, to vote it out with sort of staff having the discretion to, the attorney's office having the discretion to do either of those two things with what they send up to the mayor and commission.
Okay. Yes, I would certainly leave that up to the attorney's office. I think this must say be specific units, or does it suffice that these remain the number specified? The units are confined to specified unit. This could lead to segregation, whether intended or not. I hope that this is answered down here a little bit further down, that let's see, under E3, they shall be interspersed among the market rate dwelling units within the development with access to the same communal areas, shared spaces, entrances, exits, so on and so forth.
Yeah, my main concern is the possibility that we could inadvertently end up resegregating the affordable units from the rest. And if it's more vaguely stated, then you could potentially, somebody moves away and you move an affordable unit to a different location, but still within the complex.
I just wanted to address, I just wanted to let you know, Jim, that we did talk about this very specific issue in our committee deliberations. And the language in E3 that Brad just referenced under design, appearance, and size, inclusionary units shall be indistinguishable, same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, interspersed among the market rate dwelling units. I think that, you know, that was really the best we could come up with to ensure that they don't become segregated. If I'm hearing you correctly, you have some concerns that maybe over time they might get moved from one part of the development to another. Is that correct? Is that what you're concerned about, Jim?
Well, the concern is if specific units are always going to be inclusionary or affordable, then there might be a temptation to skimp on maintenance and things like that, because that unit's always going to be affordable. And it could differentiate over time unintentionally or otherwise.
But if it's interspersed throughout the market rate, you know, parts of the development, wouldn't that alleviate that concern?
Well, it would help greatly, but I'm just thinking that if they know that a specific unit will always be affordable, they might be tempted to be skimpier on maintenance and the like. So it could degrade relative to the neighbors over time.
And I mean, from a staff standpoint, I completely understand what Jim's saying. I'm not sure how you would build that into ordinance language other than that if we were to receive a complaint that they were not being maintained and kept up with the rest of them, then we've got a code enforcement issue under this section that they're not of the same quality, interior, exterior, and we would go after it that way. But short of other than that, setting up some type of an annual inspection process of all units, which I'm not sure we would ever get pushed through. And from a resource standpoint, it would be extensive. That would be my response to it.
Yeah, I agree with both Alice and Brad on that. And I'll just point out one more thing, sort of the ongoing administration of the program. There is some oversight in terms of checking tenant eligibility at an income level and so on. And that would be done either by the Department of Community Housing, Haley Banerjee's department, or by a third party such as the Land Trust, which would have an approved, like a development plan and an inclusionary housing agreement under this ordinance. And the penalty section says that if the developer violates an executed inclusionary housing agreement in any way, that the penalties ensue. And so maybe this is just something that to put into the inclusionary housing agreement that just says, no differentiation and no segregation, no differentiation in terms of maintenance and amenities and so on, even on an ongoing basis, not only at the front end. It's an administration thing, but I think Brad's right. It's hard to put this in the ordinance. It's just something that the entity that's administering the inclusionary compliance in the future needs to be attentive to.
Can I make a statement here?
Go for it.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, if somebody is having a problem with the landlord or whoever is in charge of this, all they have to do is make a complaint, and the complaint can be verified. I don't see this as a problem. Brad, is there a problem there?
No, I agree with you from that standpoint. That's really the best way we have to, and then because we've got it written in the ordinance, we've got more than even just the housing code to go by it, that if they've utilized that density bonus, then they're required to follow these standards.
But regardless of whether they have a density bonus, they still have to be up to code.
They still have to be up to code, yes.
And if there's a complaint made, the complaint will be followed up on by Athens-Clarke County, and that'll be taken care of.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, did we get down into the
something? Okay, before we leave that page, I had a question about the affordability period statement that I think is sort of referred to halfway down that page under item C2. And there's a statement there that maintain these through land use restriction agreement with Athens-Clarke County for a period of no less than that which is permissible under Georgia state law. What is that number currently?
That's
15. How many?
20, maybe 30, Matt? 20, I think it's 20.
So, yeah, this is something that we spent a lot of time, the attorney's office did some research on us. What's abundantly clear is that at least 20 years is absolutely enforceable. A land restriction agreement that restricts the rent or sale price is 100% unquestionably enforceable if it's for 20 years or less. And then there's a bunch of circumstances under which it may be enforceable for longer, including that it is in favor of an entity that serves public purposes, such as a land trust, or that it's in favor of a municipality, and there's sort of a, for public purposes language in the state law that limits. And so we're fairly confident. What we decided was 20 years is bulletproof, and we're fairly confident that we can go longer than that. And obviously longer is better. If we generate affordable units that remain affordable for 20 years, that's great. But then what happens in 20 years? It'd be nice if they remained affordable in perpetuity, or for 50 years or whatever. And so this is sort of something that would be in the development agreement. This is more of an administration question, how to do this. But I think the idea that we had was that we might, if a third party entity like the land trust was brought on to administer this, that we might have a developer execute sort of two parallel restrictive covenants, one in favor of Athens-Clarke County and one in favor of the land trust, and have one be for 20 years and one be for 50 years or something like that, so that even if the longer one was subject to challenge in court, which we think it probably isn't, the shorter one is definitely there. We didn't want to risk losing the 20 years to a court challenge that says you tried to make it 50 years, and so the whole thing gets thrown out. And so we figured sort of a belt and suspenders approach, where you have two different things holding the pants up, make sure that, that we get at least the 20 years, but hopefully much, much longer.
So yeah, if you don't have something like that baked into the ordinance, like right now, an owner could look at this and say, okay, from I've looked into this, and I think the minimum, I think you guys can only make me do this for 20 years. Or I'm only willing to do this for 20 years or whatever. There's nothing in the ordinance itself that then sort of requires them to be subject to an additional plan that's developed to create a longer one. And what I'm hearing you say is that a couple things. One of them is that you could execute two simultaneous agreements at the beginning, and that way that's how you have your belt and suspenders approach. But is it enough that can just be done administratively? And I guess it's funny how 15 or 20 years goes by pretty fast. And so I think that's a concern, is just like if they're looking at the ordinance, they would just look at that and think I'm subject to one period and I shouldn't be subject to any further. So, but am I understanding what you're saying correctly, and that it would happen from the beginning?
Yeah, and actually, as we look at this language now, my recollection is that we had decided to say for the greater of 20 years or the longest period permissible under Georgia law. And so it may be that the attorney's office decided to take that clause out or something. Lisa, maybe you can speak to that?
I'm not sure. I thought that we had kind of come to the consensus that we knew 20 years was definitely defensible. So I do, and I would have to ask Sherry, she did the majority of this, but I would think putting in 20 years or the greater of what's allowed by Georgia law would be the best approach, because again, we're at the attorney's office, we're comfortable that 20 years is legally defensible. Anything over that, we worry that we could violate the law against perpetuities, and just running into individual contract rights on private property. So I think it would be better to put that 20 years in there, along with that other language Matt suggested about, or the longer of what's allowed under Georgia law.
And can I just add, based on my recollection of how we got here, I think, Lisa, you're correct. We intended to have that language 20 years or the longest allowed by Georgia law, imagining, but if you go down to the very end of the ordinance, that severability clause 92712, I think that's the standard part of an ordinance, but I think we also discussed that with the idea that we could ask for and negotiate longer affordability agreements, and then if we were actually sued and, you know, the 30 years that we asked for, or perpetuity that we asked for, was shut down in court, they would still have to do the 20 years. That's how I remember that discussion going.
And Alice, I know there was that discussion of severability. I think with that, though, there would have to be two separate clauses. It would be a clause that says this, you know, covenant lasts 20 years, and then the second clause would be this covenant lasts 30 years. So if you lose the 30-year clause, you can fall back on the 20. If the 20 is not already its own separate clause, you're not going to be able to fall back on 20 if you sever off the 30, because there's no mention of 20 years in there. Does that make sense?
But yeah, so we could put in here, replace the word period with, or a period with the greater of 20 years or the longest period, and then I guess delete no less than that which. So the longest period permissible under Georgia state law. Yeah, I think that's actually what the language was intended to read. I think there may have just been a hiccup there in the entry of the final changes, because I think we had decided to put it in there, put both clauses in there for just the reason Lisa just mentioned, because of severability, to say, you know, the greater of 20 years or the longest period permissible under Georgia law.
That makes sense. Lucy?
It makes sense to me.
The only thing I wanted to ask is, how does this meld with homeowners associations? I know that homeowners associations, and I've never been in one, so I really have never had that kind of experience, but HOAs can reestablish or renew. Matt, how does that work with something like this? Is it possible to do that or not?
You know, that's if I'm understanding the question right, I think we'll have to deal with that when we get to the owner occupied part. But this part is part D here. The header of this paragraph we're talking about is, I should say part C, leased or rented inclusionary units. And then it has the sub 1 and sub 2 that we're sort of tweaking right now. So I think you're absolutely right. You know, we'll have to consider the role of HOAs in owner occupied inclusionary units in our next phase.
Okay, but this is not going to affect this particular group. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm just saying that there wouldn't be an HOA here, because this is a development of rental units that would be owned by an owner who would own the complex and rent out the units.
Got it. Thank you.
And actually, one last little tweak, Brad, on the language in this same bit. It says Athens-Clarke County or its authorized designee, and I think that should be and or, just for the reason I mentioned, because we might do two parallel covenants, you know, to say the land trust and Athens-Clarke County or something like that. And so we need to allow for the possibility of a restriction in favor of both of those entities.
Got it. Okay. All right, then down to the chart. Here are the zoning districts that were included in this first round, and you see the associated density bonuses along with the percentages if selecting either the 80% or the 60% as option A or B respectively, and those are noted underneath the chart. Jim did have a comment here. I mean, it's intended to be the maximum number. So if you get a 50% density bonus and 10% of the units are required to be affordable, you're allowed to build 150 units with the density bonus. 15 of those 150, it's not 150 market and then the density. It's the percentage comes out of the full density bonus.
My question had to do with whether or not the number was the original approved number before any bonuses. I assume that's what it is, but it was a possible ambiguity.
Jim, can you clarify that? What number do you mean when you say?
It says the maximum number of dwelling units approved in the applicable zoning district. I'm trying to make sure that that number approved refers to the original definition before any bonuses were considered.
Yes. And then the bonus would be that, I mean, RM1 being 16 beds an acre, you get a 50% bonus that would take you to 24 beds an acre. And then 15% of the 24 beds an acre would have to be affordable.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, Brad, maybe the word approved is what's confusing there. What if we just said allowed or something? Because approved sounds like after it goes through the planning commission and the mayor and commission, as opposed to just what the zoning ordinance allows.
Do that.
Below that table, you all talk about rounding down in that calculation, and then the page before you talk about rounding up, and I got clarification on that yesterday, why that's different. I understand that. I do wonder at the bottom of the page that's immediately before the page right here with the table on it, at the bottom there, you see under C2, it gets into sort of the size of the inclusionary units, right? And so I'm wondering if do you have to get, so the idea would be if a developer is required to build 10 inclusionary units.
I was looking for there's a section in here that says they've got to be of the same mix. Maybe a little further down.
Oh, no, I think you were right. Okay, so let's see. It's
right here. At the housing plan.
No, actually, if you go down a little bit to the page with the table on it, I guess is the best way to do it. Yep, okay, and then just go up a little bit to the bottom of the page right before that. So now it's on the screen, it's right in the middle. So you see like design, appearance, and size. And then item 2, I think, is the item that talks about what unit, like, in other words, I think this is getting at, you don't want to create a situation where an owner is required who's participating in this has then agreed to build 10 units, but I know that on the next page, it addresses square footage, or somewhere it does, I can't remember.
Yes, no, you're right. And it's.
So do we need to talk about rounding for that calculation? Because it's very seldom that it's going to be that they have to build 10, right? It's going to be like they have to build 6 or something. And then you're getting at, okay, well, the rest of the development, there's 40% of the units are 3-bedroom, 20% are 1-bedroom, right? Like that, and 40% are some other thing. And so those calculations don't work very well when you're just dealing with like 7 units. So I'm just wondering, since you all got so specific with rounding up and rounding down these other calculations, do you actually need to get that specific here as well?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I think that you're absolutely right that it's rarely going to work out perfectly. Like if a development has 50% 1-bedroom units and 40% 2-bedrooms and 10% 3-bedrooms, and then it's required to have 7 or 27 inclusionary units, applying those percentages will result in fractions. And that's just inevitable. And so we did this sort of standard legislative cop-out when you want to leave it to the staff to figure it out on a case-by-case basis, which is, we said, substantially the same proportion. But that's on purpose. It's designed so that if somebody comes in and they say like, hey, Brad, so it looks like these would be the percentages, Brad can just make a sort of case-by-case, yes, this fits, you're doing it right, but with the intention of not letting them systematically underproduce bedrooms in the affordable units. Like if they have a fraction of 2-bedroom units and they want to go down, then probably their fraction of 3-bedroom units is going to go up so that it comes out in the wash. And it's hard to legislate that. It's more of an administrative thing, I think, to
That sounds good. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay. Let's see. 50, I mean, Jim, on this one, the 1,500 feet was picked for a couple reasons. I mean, it was a rounder number than the traditional quarter-mile, 5-minute walking distance that you see that people will generally tend to walk. I think that comes out to about 1,320 feet or something, is the quarter mile. We do already have 1,500 feet as a number for our commercial downtown zone as to how far away your parking can be from your residence in the downtown. So we've got two numbers in the code: 1,500 feet in downtown, 1,000 feet on the Millage Avenue Special District overlay. We were originally at 1,000, and we ended up changing that at the end to 1,500.
Yeah, this is just a nitpicky question, and it's based on the fact that my driveway is 1,600 feet long, so I wouldn't qualify.
Driveway lead to a bus stop?
No, of course, there's about a couple-mile walk to a bus stop from there.
You know, and I think what this is really intended to do is try to get these things sited along the route. You know, once you're sited along the route, the ability to build your own, but work with transit and get a bus stop moved closer is certainly something that I would anticipate we'll see a lot of in instances where they're trying to get this parking reduction. And I think that was it, other than the quotation issue again in terms of Jim's. And Jim, I really appreciate all this review and these catches on these.
Also, Brad, he had the last thing at the bottom. This ordinance deals only with multifamily rentals. Will there be other sections related to sales or to single family zones? And I know we've talked about that in the course of this conversation, but yes, Jim, the hope is that we will move forward with this just over the months and weeks that this committee worked together. We realized that if we wanted to get something before the Planning Commission and then ultimately the Mayor Commission inside of like 5 years, we needed to go here first. So you know, call it low hanging fruit if you want to. I don't think it's that low hanging, but it's certainly, you know, we've got the ladders to get to it. But we have expressed, you know, amongst ourselves and directly to the mayor when he's talked to us that we hope that we'll, you know, this group or some version of it will remain meeting in the future to move this on to other zones as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that the other reason that we, I think y'all know this, focused on rental housing to begin with is just because, you know, the same reason I think it was John Dillinger said he robbed banks, because that's where the money is. You know, there are a lot of projects that have come before us for preliminary plan development that are still in the pipeline and haven't been approved yet, where the developer's asking us, you know, they're asking Brad for early versions of this ordinance because they want to try to comply with it before it even is the law. They're desperate to have a structure that they can work with so that when they're asking for waivers and, you know, that they can try to comply with this ordinance. And so there's just a lot of housing units in the pipeline that I think the developers want to take advantage of an ordinance like this. And so they've been begging Mayor Gertz and Brad to get it out.
And if I could just add one more thing to that, Tim Denson actually mentioned this in a meeting we were in last night. A bunch of people on this call were there regarding the missing middle housing scan. But this ordinance is designed to, you know, be by right. So someone who wants to comply with this ordinance doesn't have to go through any type 1, type 2, type anything procedure, but also it kind of sets a community standard so that even developments that are coming through, you know, in the PD process may well look to this as this is what the community wants. And you know, I would just refer you back to the most boring part of any ordinance, the whereases at the beginning. those were also carefully worded to make it clear that we see affordable housing as a community good, which hopefully down the road will, maybe help us to have longer, covenants on the properties. But that's really what we were going for with the whereases, and the future is what we're looking at.
I'd just like to add the comment. I think it's a well-developed ordinance, and I had a few questions, but I'm generally pleased with it.
Lucy.
I go back a long way, as everybody says, and I'm 120 years old, as everybody knows. One of the things that I think was very important in 1998, the first comprehensive plan, and then again the 2008 comprehensive plan update, we said affordable housing is important to this community, and it was all about ownership. And it's only become in the last few years, maybe the last 20, go back, not few, but affordability is really about rental housing. It's about all housing. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate Matt and Alice and what you've done on this. This has just been amazing, because it has finally brought this down to where it should be, where it is about affordable housing, not affordable ownership. And that's so important in this community. We need to be able to have people where they can just live. Thank you so much, both of you.
I have to say, I second that. The amount of work that the Inclusionary Housing Committee has done, and that you're not done yet, which is the other amazing part, is you still now are going to move on to tackle the next pieces of this. But I'm sort of blown away, but then not blown away, because I know how much time you've put into this. So it's not surprising that it's really good. But would it be helpful at this point, Brad, for us to, like, do you feel like staff has captured what we've...
I do. I've made notes on all the changes and the corrections. There's a couple of that we'll get with Sherry on, and Sherry and Lisa and I will do it. And I mean, if you're comfortable moving it forward with the changes as discussed, I'm comfortable that we could make that happen.
Is there anyone who wants to make a motion?
Do we need public comment?
Do we have public comment?
There is somebody in, yes. Thank you, Rick.
Yep.
It is just Commissioner Houle.
Oh, okay. It's just Commissioner.
Just Commissioner
Houle.
Well, glad you're here. I saw Kristen and Alice's hand go up, but were you both raising your hand to make a motion?
Actually, I just want to make one more comment, and then anyone can make the motion. Brad gave a lot of shout out to the committee, which I, thank you, and also the other members of the committee. But I just want to say this was also a Herculean staff effort. As Brad said, it was every 2 weeks. I mean, I don't think we skipped unless it was maybe Christmas. And everything the committee asked for, staff said, yes, we can figure that out. And by staff, it's not, it goes up to Nikki, who was our manager's office representative, who was there at every single meeting. And instead of sort of hearing, well, here's why you can't do that, we kept getting, okay, we'll look into that. We'll look into that. And the attorney's office, the planning office, and the manager's office all really, really stepped up on this. And I appreciate it. It would not have happened without that. So I'll let someone else make the motion.
I
Kristen?
would like to make a motion to what are we doing to adopt this proposal with the suggested changes from the group? Is that correct?
That'll work.
Okay.
Lucy, is that you raising your hand to second?
That's Lucy's hand raising a second.
Excellent. Okay, any further discussion? I have a quick question. I think we've talked about the idea that we've got to just get something going with regard to inclusionary zoning, knowing that it might need to be tweaked in the future. Is any sort of regular review of this built into the ordinance in any way or administratively going to happen? Or is it a little bit more like we keep this on our radar, we look in, 1 or 2 years to see if anyone's taken advantage of this, and we see if there's something with the ordinance that needs a tweak to further incentivize folks? I know you guys have talked about that in the committee, but I'm just wondering if there's any, where you are with that.
As I recall it, the decision was made not to specifically put it in the ordinance, but it went up with the recommendation from the committee to the mayor and commission, who would ultimately make that decision, is to set, a time period for review. The first 12 months may be a little difficult because it's going to take generally any projects that come through longer than that to even get off the ground. But that's the way I remember it. You all may remember it differently, Matt and Alice, but it is definitely the intent for there to be regular checkups for a whole host of reasons, but first and foremost to see if those percentages as set forth in the ordinance are generating interest or not. I mean, and that's the biggest first check-in point.
Yeah, that's right. And the one thing I'll add is, the payment in lieu alternative under section 927-7 specifically says that the payment in lieu amount will be a per unit figure determined from time to time by the mayor and commission. And we decided not to say annually, because we didn't want to put pressure on them to update it on a schedule. But the idea is that as the area median income changes annually, that the payment in lieu figure may need to be updated annually. And moreover, as we see what the buy-in is from the developer community, if people are opting into this and we're getting a lot of projects in commercial downtown that are participating in the inclusionary program but doing the payment in lieu, then maybe we raise the payment in lieu. But we didn't want to set it too high initially because we'd rather be sure that people are going to opt in as we're kind of feeling our way through this. So that's one critical figure that is going to be updated maybe annually, but not necessarily annually, just up to the mayor and commission.
Right.
Sense. Is there any further discussion? We have a motion on the floor. Okay, great. So all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Or your pen, as the case may be. Okay, and all opposed. Great, so motion passes. Good job, inclusionary zoning group. Okay. All right, great. So I don't have a report. Brad, you do have a report, right?
I do. One just kind of related comment to that last item. Part of the reason it was so successful is there was a really tough chair to that committee. I mean, there were a lot of times, I know from staff standpoint, that we would have loved to have heard Alice say, we're going to take the next meeting off and give you a month, and they kept meeting. So she pushed us along and put in a ton of work. So thanks to her for serving as chair to that group too. Okay, report from Tuesday night. There were 5 items considered by the mayor and commission. First item was the special use for the ground floor unit on Clayton Street at Chick Piano. It was approved as recommended by the planning commission. Second item was the tax credit project out on Highway 72 that had the commercial in the front. It had a rezone and a special use with a variance. All were approved as recommended by you. The special use for the single unit in the Bottle Works on Prince Avenue approved with condition as recommended. The PD amendment on Sorensen and the Snapfinger plan development was held for a month cycle for the commissioner to be allowed to work a little more closely with the applicant and their engineer in terms of house location and siting and get a better understanding of what was going on. And then the text amendments to chapters 9.4 and 9.13 that dealt with the airport overlay were approved as you sent forward. So successful evening, got a lot done then, and looking forward to these going forward.
I have a question.
Mhm.
What happened to the thing we sent back to the hearings board? Have they met?
They have not met yet. No, we have discussed with the applicant, and they are on the March agenda, I believe, in order to allow the attorney time to prep the appropriate documents that he would like to take back to the board as part of their application.
Great. This meeting was shorter than I expected it to be. Does anyone have any other comments or questions? Okay, well, I will accept a motion to adjourn if anyone wants to make it.
Moved.
Alice and Jim seconded. All in favor? Raise your hand or your pen. Great. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time around.
Thanks,
Thank y'all.
everybody.
Good job tonight.
Bye.
Bye.